Helen and George Johnson's 50th wedding anniversary was supposed to be a celebration of love and lifelong commitment, but instead, it became the night a devastating secret tore their perfect world apart and exposed a betrayal that would shock an entire neighborhood. The quiet suburban neighborhood of Maplewood was known for its calm streets, well-kept gardens, and close-knit community. Among the many families who lived there, the Johnsons stood out as the picture of stability and love. George and Helen Johnson had been married for 50 years, a milestone that was rare and admired. Their house, a charming two-story with white shutters and a rose garden, was often the site of neighborhood gatherings. People spoke of their relationship with warmth and respect, describing them as devoted partners who had weathered life's storms together. To the neighbors, the Johnsons represented a perfect marriage, the kind that gave hope and inspiration. The anticipation for their golden anniversary was palpable. Invitations had been sent weeks in advance, and the community was buzzing with excitement. Family members from out of town were arriving, and close friends made plans to join the celebration. Everyone expected an evening filled with laughter, reminiscing, and heartfelt speeches. The local florist had delivered bouquets of white lilies and yellow roses, colors chosen for their symbolism of purity and friendship. The banquet hall was decorated tastefully, reflecting the couple's understated elegance. There was a feeling of joy and gratitude in the air as people prepared to honor a love story that seemed unbreakable. Helen, a soft-spoken woman known for her kindness and grace, moved through the room with a gentle smile. She greeted guests warmly, her eyes shining with happiness. George, tall and distinguished with silver hair, mingled easily, telling stories and sharing memories from their life together. The couple had planned the event meticulously, hoping to create a memorable night for everyone. The children and grandchildren gathered nearby, their laughter mixing with the soft music playing in the background. From the outside, it was a perfect scene, the kind that filled photo albums and hearts alike. But beneath the surface, an unseen tension simmered. For years, Helen had sensed subtle changes in George's behavior. The once attentive and affectionate husband had grown distant, spending more time away from home and offering vague explanations. Helen had tried to dismiss her doubts, afraid to face a painful truth. She clung to the hope that their marriage, so full of shared history, could overcome any challenge. Yet the unease lingered, a quiet shadow over the celebrations. As the evening progressed, guests took their seats for dinner, the mood light and celebratory. Speeches began, highlighting the couple's achievements and the strong bond they shared. Friends recounted stories from decades past, painting a picture of a life well lived and a love that had stood the test of time. The Johnsons listened, their faces glowing with pride and emotion. It seemed impossible that anything could disrupt the harmony of the night. Then, just as the main course was served, Helen rose to speak. Her voice, steady but filled with a mix of pain and resolve, cut through the chatter. She began to tell a story no one expected, one that would unravel the fabric of trust the community had woven around the Johnsons. The revelation that followed was devastating. George had been having an affair, not with a stranger but with their neighbor, someone the family had welcomed into their lives for years. The room fell silent. Shock rippled through the crowd, disbelief etched on every face. The perfect marriage, the couple who seemed to embody loyalty and commitment, had been hiding a secret that shattered their image. Whispers spread like wildfire, and eyes darted nervously around the room, trying to grasp the reality of the betrayal. Helen's public exposure of the affair was more than a personal accusation, it was a rupture in the community's sense of security. If such a trusted couple could harbor secrets so deep, what did that mean for everyone else? The joyous celebration had turned into a gathering marked by suspicion and heartbreak. The neighbors who had once felt safe in their close relationships now faced a painful reckoning. In the days that followed, the story dominated conversations and news reports. People struggled to understand how such deception could exist in their midst. Questions multiplied, and no one was certain what else might come to light. The Johnsons' 50th wedding anniversary, meant to be a celebration of love, had instead exposed cracks beneath the surface, cracks that would soon reveal an even darker mystery waiting to unfold. This night would be remembered not just for the years of marriage it marked, but for the moment when a peaceful neighborhood's faith was broken, and a hidden world of secrets began to emerge. The story of the Johnsons was far from over, and what began as a scandal would soon lead to revelations no one could have imagined. The atmosphere in the banquet hall had been warm and full of celebration, but everything changed in an instant when Helen Johnson rose to speak. The room, filled with friends, family, and neighbors, had been humming with quiet conversations and soft music. People were raising their glasses to toast a lifetime of love and commitment, but Helen's presence at the microphone brought a sudden stillness, as if the air itself had been sucked out of the room. Helen began calmly, her voice steady, but carrying an unmistakable weight. She told the gathered crowd something that no one had ever expected to hear on such a joyous occasion. George had been having an affair. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and unbelievable. The shock was not only in the revelation itself, but in the person with whom George had betrayed the marriage, their neighbor, someone trusted and welcomed into their lives for years. This wasn't just a private heartbreak, it was a public shattering betrayal. Gasps and murmurs spread across the room as the news sank in. The celebration, once full of laughter and fond memories, froze into disbelief. The guests looked at each other, then back at the Johnsons, struggling to reconcile the loving couple they thought they knew with this shocking reality. Many in the crowd had long admired the Johnsons. Their relationship had seemed flawless, a model of dedication and unity. To hear of an affair, especially one involving a neighbor, was a betrayal not only of Helen, but of the entire community's trust. This neighbor was someone who had been part of their social circle, someone who had often shared in family barbecues and holiday gatherings. The realization that this person had been involved in the secret affair was a blow that sent shockwaves through the room. Helen's revelation was not made out of spite or anger alone. It was clear from her composed demeanor that this was a moment she had agonized over, a truth she felt compelled to expose despite the pain it would cause. The guests could see the hurt in her eyes, the quiet strength behind her words. Her decision to reveal the affair publicly was as much about reclaiming her dignity as it was about forcing the truth into the light. The reactions around the room varied. Some guests sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what they had just heard. Others whispered in disbelief, sharing theories and doubts. A few faces paled as if the news had hit them personally. The tightly woven fabric of the neighborhood's social life seemed to unravel before their eyes. How could such deception thrive unnoticed for so long? How many other secrets lurked behind the smiles and polite hellos? Helen's announcement transformed the evening from a celebration of love to a scene of tension and uncertainty. The once festive banquet felt cold and heavy with unspoken questions. Guests found themselves re-evaluating what they thought they knew about the Johnsons, and by extension, their own community. The affair was not just a personal scandal, it was a rupture that would change relationships and perceptions for years to come. What had started as a joyous milestone now became a turning point for everyone present. The neighbors who had admired the couple were forced to confront the uncomfortable reality that appearances could be deceiving. The husband, who had been seen as devoted and dependable, was suddenly revealed as someone capable of profound betrayal. The wife, who had been a symbol of grace and loyalty, became a figure of courage in exposing the truth. As the evening wore on, whispers grew louder, and the initial shock began to evolve into a ripple of suspicion and curiosity. Questions arose about how long the affair had lasted, what had motivated it, and whether others had known and stayed silent. The revelation opened a door to secrets long buried beneath the surface of their quiet neighborhood. Helen's choice to expose the affair during such a public event ensured that the story could not be ignored or swept under the rug. It forced everyone to face the uncomfortable truths that had been hidden behind closed doors. In doing so, it set in motion a series of events that would uncover more than just infidelity. It would expose blackmail, hidden motives, and dangerous plans threatening to unravel much more than a marriage. The night that began with so much hope and joy ended in stunned silence and uneasy glances. For the guests, the revelation was just the beginning of a long and unsettling journey, one that would challenge their understanding of trust, loyalty, and the people they thought they knew. The anniversary celebration had turned into a turning point, not only for the Johnsons but for the entire community. The shockwaves from Helen's announcement did not stop with the banquet hall. They quickly spread to the entire neighborhood. The focus of suspicion and curiosity soon settled on the neighbor involved in the affair. For years, this neighbor had been seen as friendly, dependable, and a fixture of the community. Always ready to lend a hand or join a block party, they had earned the trust of those around them. But now, that image was shattered. The neighbor's secret role in the betrayal sent shock through friends and family alike, turning warm greetings into cold stares. Investigations and conversations behind closed doors began revealing uncomfortable truths. People wondered how such an intimate and prolonged affair could have gone unnoticed for so long. Subtle signs once dismissed as harmless were reconsidered in this new light. Late-night visits, hushed phone calls, and unusual absences from social events, details once overlooked, now appeared as pieces of a carefully hidden puzzle. Neighbors began talking quietly about the affair, each sharing their own theories and suspicions. Some admitted they had sensed tension between the husband and wife but never imagined the cause. Others confessed to having witnessed fleeting moments of discomfort or secretive glances exchanged between the husband and the neighbor. The betrayal felt deeply personal, like a wound inflicted not only on Helen, but on the entire community. The neighbor's involvement added a layer of complexity. Who had seemed so dependable was now a man caught in a complex web of deceit. The neighbor, once a trusted friend, was implicated in actions that threatened not only the Johnson family but potentially the entire neighborhood. The peaceful streets were no longer safe, and questions about who could be trusted grew louder with each new revelation. It wasn't just about personal lives anymore. The involvement of financial transactions, secret meetings, and mysterious contacts suggested that criminal activity might be at play. The possibility that George was being manipulated or coerced into illegal dealings added a layer of urgency and fear. The community, once proud of its harmony and trust, now faced the uncomfortable truth that darkness had crept into its midst. Local law enforcement stepped up their efforts, treating the case as more than just a domestic issue. They began following leads that stretched beyond Maplewood, uncovering connections to people and places that seemed unrelated at first. Each discovery painted a picture of a man caught between loyalty to his family and pressures from dangerous forces. As the investigation deepened, neighbors who had once been casual acquaintances grew wary of each other. The line between friend and foe blurred, and paranoia settled over the streets. The scandal that had begun with a personal betrayal was evolving into a crisis that threatened to tear the community apart. Helen, now caught in the middle of this unfolding nightmare, faced difficult choices. Her courage in exposing the affair had set events in motion, but it had also put her and her family in the spotlight of something far bigger. As secrets spilled into the open, she struggled to understand the full scope of what George had been involved in and what dangers lay ahead. The once celebrated 50th anniversary had become a turning point. The facade of a perfect life was crumbling, revealing a maze of hidden troubles and risks. What everyone had believed was a simple story of love and betrayal was now a complex mystery involving financial desperation, secret alliances, and threats that extended beyond the neighborhood's peaceful borders. This was no longer just a family scandal. It was the beginning of a deeper investigation that promised to uncover truths that could change everything the community thought it knew. The night of celebration had turned into the start of a dangerous and unpredictable journey, with consequences that none of the Johnsons or their neighbors could have anticipated. As the investigation into George Johnson's double life deepened, a darker and more sinister element came to light: blackmail. What had started as whispers of an affair and financial trouble soon revealed a chilling force operating behind the scenes. Someone was using George's secret against him, exploiting his mistakes and vulnerabilities to manipulate him in ways that threatened not just his marriage, but the safety of everyone involved. The evidence emerged gradually. Strange messages found on George's phone hinted at threats and demands. Anonymous letters delivered to his home contained veiled warnings, suggesting that if he didn't comply with certain conditions, his affair and other secrets would be exposed in ways far more damaging than a public announcement at an anniversary party. The tone was cold and calculated, leaving no doubt that someone was watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. This blackmail was not a random act. It was carefully orchestrated, designed to keep George under control and force him into decisions that served someone else's interests. The demands included financial payments, information sharing, and even coercion to participate in questionable activities. The deeper investigators looked, the more it became clear that the affair with the neighbor might have been only one piece of a larger puzzle, a manipulation that kept George entangled in a web of threats and fear. The person behind the blackmail remained a mystery for some time. Suspicion swirled around the neighbor, who had close access to George and could have been involved in setting up or facilitating the scheme. Others speculated about business associates or people from George's past, individuals who might have held grudges or sought revenge. The uncertainty added to the growing tension in the neighborhood, as everyone wondered who could be pulling the strings. Helen's role became even more significant in this context. Her decision to expose the affair publicly may have been fueled by desperation and a need to break free from the control blackmail imposed on her husband. By shining a light on George's betrayal, she took a bold step to wrest back some power and protect herself and her family from the shadowy threats looming over them. Her actions complicated the situation, but also forced the hand of the unknown blackmailer, who now faced exposure as well. Financial records uncovered during the investigation revealed unusual payments that aligned with the timeline of the blackmail. Money had been quietly transferred from George's accounts to unknown recipients, often in small amounts that seemed designed to avoid detection. These transactions raised questions about how deep the blackmail went and whether others were complicit. The neighbor's involvement in some of these financial dealings further blurred the lines between personal betrayal and criminal conspiracy. The community watched with growing anxiety as these revelations unfolded. The neighborhood that had once felt safe was now the backdrop for a dangerous game of manipulation and deceit. People began to fear that more lives could be ruined if the blackmailer's plans continued unchecked. The stakes were high, and the consequences of failure seemed devastating. law enforcement intensified their efforts to uncover the blackmailer's identity. They used surveillance, traced financial trails, and interviewed those close to the Johnsons. Despite their progress, the elusive figure remained just out of reach, skilled at hiding in the shadows and exploiting weaknesses. The longer the blackmailer operated, the more control they seemed to wield over George and the situation. This new layer of the story transformed the community's understanding of the scandal. It was no longer simply about an affair between a husband and a neighbor. It had become a dangerous struggle involving coercion, fear, and manipulation. The revelation of blackmail showed how vulnerable even the most respected individuals could be when secrets were weaponized. For Helen and George, the blackmail added complexity to their already fractured relationship. Trust had been broken in many ways, not only by the affair but by the forces controlling their lives from behind the scenes. Their marriage was no longer just a personal matter but part of a larger, more threatening conflict that required careful navigation and courage. The public exposure of the affair at the anniversary celebration had been the spark that ignited this entire chain of events. It forced hidden threats into the open and challenged the community to confront uncomfortable truths. The story that began with betrayal was evolving into a dangerous mystery of power and control, with each new discovery raising the stakes higher. As the investigation continued, the neighborhood braced for what might come next. The blackmailer's identity and motives remained a shadowy enigma, but one thing was clear: the affair was only the surface of a deeper, more dangerous game. The lives of the Johnsons, and everyone around them, hung in the balance, caught in a web of secrets that threatened to unravel everything they had built. The tension in the neighborhood escalated as more unsettling details about the blackmail came to light. What had seemed like an isolated act of coercion was now revealing a disturbing pattern of control and manipulation that extended far beyond George Johnson. It became clear that the blackmailer's ambitions were not limited to one victim but involved a broader plan with dangerous consequences for multiple people in the community. Investigators uncovered evidence suggesting that the blackmailer was using information gleaned from George's affair to exert pressure on others as well. This wasn't just about keeping George silent or extracting money, it was about gaining power and influence through fear. The revelation sent a wave of unease through the neighborhood, as residents realized the threat might be closer to home than they had imagined. The blackmailer appeared to have intimate knowledge of the lives of several community members, exploiting secrets that no one had expected to be known. Private conversations, financial struggles, and past mistakes were weaponized to create a climate of distrust and paranoia. People who had once been close friends now found themselves watching each other carefully, afraid that anyone could be vulnerable to exposure or manipulation. As the scope of the blackmail became clearer, some neighbors who had initially dismissed the affair as a personal scandal started to feel the true weight of the situation. The stakes were much higher than a broken marriage. They involved hidden agendas, threats, and possibly criminal activities that could impact everyone. The community's sense of safety eroded, replaced by suspicion and anxiety. The neighbor involved in George's affair became a focal point again, as suspicions about their involvement in the blackmail deepened. Investigators discovered that this individual had connections to several people who had been threatened or coerced, raising questions about whether they were working alone or as part of a larger group. The neighbor's motives, once assumed to be purely personal, now seemed tangled with darker ambitions. The unfolding drama cast a shadow over the Johnson family's life. Helen, already burdened by betrayal and public humiliation, now faced threats and pressure from forces beyond her control. The family's privacy was shattered, and the sense of normalcy they once had was gone. Friends and relatives struggled to support them while grappling with their own fears about what might come next. Amid the turmoil, law enforcement expanded their investigation to include cybercrime units and financial experts. They traced suspicious transactions, analyzed communications, and sought patterns that could identify the blackmailer's identity and network. Technology became both a tool and a battlefield, as the unknown culprit used digital means to conceal their actions and intimidate victims. The community's response was mixed. Some residents rallied around the Johnsons, offering support and solidarity. Others distanced themselves, wary of becoming targets or caught in the crossfire. Social gatherings dwindled, and the once vibrant neighborhood grew quiet and wary. The bonds that had held the community together were fraying under the weight of fear and suspicion. The media began to take notice, turning the local scandal into a story with national interest. Reporters sought interviews, published speculative articles, and dug into the background of everyone involved. The Johnsons found themselves at the center of unwanted attention, their private pain broadcast for public consumption. This exposure added another layer of complexity to their ordeal, complicating efforts to resolve the crisis quietly. Helen's bravery in exposing the affair remained a pivotal moment in the narrative, but it also placed her in a difficult position. She became both a symbol of truth and a target for those who wanted to silence the fallout.
The courage it took to confront the betrayal was now tested against threats that went beyond personal hurt to real danger. As days turned into weeks, the search for the blackmailer intensified. Every new lead, every piece of evidence brought investigators closer, but also deeper into a tangled web of deceit. The neighborhood held its breath, waiting to see who would be exposed next and whether the nightmare could be brought to an end.
As the investigation advanced, it became clear that the blackmail was only one part of a far more intricate and calculated scheme. Beneath the surface of personal betrayals and financial manipulation lay hidden motives that extended beyond the Johnsons and their neighbor. The community began to uncover connections that linked the affair and blackmail to a larger conspiracy aimed at controlling or exploiting multiple members of the neighborhood. The revelations sent shockwaves through Maplewood. What once seemed like a private scandal between a husband and wife had evolved into a tangled web of deception involving greed, revenge, and power struggles. The deeper the authorities dug, the more they found evidence of hidden alliances and secret deals that involved not only the Johnson family but several influential figures in the area. Documents seized during the investigation pointed to a carefully orchestrated plan to destabilize certain families in the neighborhood, using personal secrets as leverage. The affair between George and the neighbor appeared to be a calculated move to gain influence and extract financial benefits. It was no coincidence but part of a strategy that exploited vulnerabilities for gain. The neighbor, previously seen as a friendly and trustworthy presence, was revealed to have a hidden agenda. Beyond the affair, this individual was involved in manipulating others through threats and coercion, orchestrating events to create chaos and confusion. Their role in the blackmail scheme was central, acting as a link between the victims and an unknown mastermind directing the operation from behind the scenes. The investigation uncovered links between this mastermind and local business dealings, suggesting that the scheme was tied to attempts at controlling property, money, and social standing within the community. The stakes were much higher than anyone had imagined, involving not just personal relationships but financial empires and power dynamics that shaped the neighborhood. Community members found themselves caught in the middle of this struggle for control. Friendships were strained or broken, as loyalties were tested and long-hidden secrets surfaced. People who had once trusted each other now wondered if their neighbors had been part of the conspiracy or victims themselves. The fabric of the community was unraveling, revealing deep divisions and resentments. Helen's exposure of the affair had been the spark that ignited this chain reaction, but the fallout was far greater than she or anyone else had anticipated. The revelation brought to light not only personal betrayal, but a dangerous game of manipulation that threatened to destroy lives and reputations across the neighborhood. What had seemed like a private pain was now a public crisis. The authorities faced challenges in unraveling the complex network of relationships and motives. Many people involved had carefully concealed their actions, using deception and intimidation to maintain control. Witnesses were reluctant to come forward, fearing retaliation or social isolation. The investigation required patience and careful strategy to piece together the truth. Meanwhile, the Johnson family struggled to rebuild their lives amid the chaos. The betrayal, the blackmail, and the unfolding conspiracy had left deep wounds. Helen and George found themselves grappling with feelings of anger, betrayal, and confusion as they tried to protect their family and find a way forward. Their private pain had become a public spectacle, adding pressure and strain. The neighborhood, once a place of comfort and community, was transformed by the revelations. Trust was shattered, and fear lingered. Residents questioned how well they truly knew their neighbors and what secrets might still be hidden. The image of Maplewood as a peaceful, close-knit community was forever changed. As the investigation continued, new layers of deception emerged. Each discovery brought more questions and raised the stakes higher. The deeper truth behind the affair, the blackmail, and the conspiracy promised to reshape the lives of everyone involved. The neighborhood was caught in a storm of secrets and lies, with the future uncertain and fragile. The anniversary celebration that had sparked the crisis was now seen as a turning point, a moment when long-hidden realities exploded into the open. What had started as a shocking revelation had grown into a mystery with far-reaching consequences. The community faced a reckoning, forced to confront uncomfortable truths about loyalty, trust, and the price of silence. In the shadows of Maplewood's quiet streets, a dangerous game continued, with power, greed, and revenge driving forces that threatened to consume everyone in its path. The story was far from over, and the next chapter promised even more shocking twists as the search for justice and truth pressed on. As the investigation peeled back layers of deception, another shocking revelation surfaced. There was more at stake than just the betrayal between George Johnson and the neighbor. A plan had been quietly unfolding for months, one that involved not only personal vendettas but also a larger scheme designed to seize control of key assets in the neighborhood. The affair and blackmail were just the visible symptoms of a much deeper conspiracy. The discovery came when financial experts involved in the case noticed unusual activity tied to several properties in the area, including some owned by the Johnson family. These transactions were structured in ways meant to obscure their true purpose, involving shell companies and offshore accounts. It became apparent that the conspiracy was aimed at manipulating property values and ownership, with the goal of benefiting a hidden group that sought to consolidate power and wealth. This larger plan required careful orchestration, and the affair between George and the neighbor was one of the ways to apply pressure and create leverage. By exploiting personal scandals and blackmail, the conspirators could weaken key individuals, forcing them to comply with demands or risk public ruin. The revelations shocked many who had assumed that such schemes were distant or belonged to urban legends rather than their quiet suburban street. The neighbor's role in this operation became even clearer. Far from being just an unfaithful spouse, they were a key player acting as a liaison between the mastermind behind the scheme and the victims. Their charm and seeming friendliness had concealed a calculated and ruthless drive for power. The neighbor's involvement in the blackmail, financial transactions and secret meetings painted a picture of someone deeply embedded in the conspiracy, using the affair as both a weapon and a bargaining chip. Helen Johnson found herself at the center of this turmoil, caught between the public pain of betrayal and the private terror of a scheme that threatened her family's security. Her decision to expose the affair had unintended consequences, exposing her family to danger but also shining a light on the conspiracy that might have otherwise continued unnoticed. Her bravery sparked hope that the truth could be uncovered, but it also put her squarely in the crosshairs of those who wanted to keep the secrets buried. The community's reaction was a mixture of disbelief, fear, and anger. Longtime residents struggled to process the idea that their peaceful neighborhood had become the battleground for such a ruthless power play. Friendships fractured as suspicions spread and people wondered who else might be involved. The sense of safety that had defined the area was gone, replaced by a pervasive feeling of vulnerability. Law enforcement agencies intensified their efforts, coordinating with federal investigators to untangle the complex web of financial fraud, blackmail, and personal betrayals. The investigation uncovered more links to local officials and business leaders, some of whom had been quietly supporting or benefiting from the scheme. The scale of the conspiracy was larger than anyone had imagined, reaching into layers of the community once thought untouchable. As the story unfolded, the neighbors who had once greeted each other with smiles now eyed one another with suspicion. Social gatherings became tense or stopped altogether. The neighborhood's identity as a friendly, trusting community was shattered by the harsh reality of manipulation and greed. Helen and George's personal lives were irreversibly altered. The damage caused by the affair was compounded by the threat to their family's financial future and personal safety. They faced the difficult challenge of rebuilding trust within their family while navigating a dangerous situation that involved unknown enemies working behind the scenes. The anniversary celebration that had seemed like a joyful milestone now stood as a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. What was meant to be a celebration of love and commitment had exposed the darkest corners of their lives and their community. The fallout from that night was still unfolding, with consequences reaching far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The neighborhood was left grappling with questions about loyalty, justice, and the true nature of the people they lived beside. The facade of perfection had been shattered, revealing a landscape of secrets, lies, and hidden agendas. The journey to uncover the full truth was far from over, with each new discovery bringing them closer to answers but also greater danger. In the quiet moments after the storm, the people of Maplewood realized that their lives had been changed forever. The betrayal, blackmail, and conspiracy were not just events in a story but realities that demanded courage, resilience, and a willingness to face the unknown. The perfect image they once believed in was gone, replaced by a harsher truth, and the fight for justice was only beginning. The deeper the investigation went, the more the facade of the neighborhood's calm and perfection crumbled. What once appeared to be isolated incidents of betrayal and blackmail now unfolded into a sprawling network of deceit that implicated many more people than anyone had anticipated. The story that had begun with a husband's affair was rapidly transforming into a full-blown crisis affecting the entire community. Authorities discovered that the conspiracy had roots stretching back years. The mastermind behind the operation had cleverly built influence through quiet manipulations, carefully placing individuals in key positions to further the scheme. The affair between George Johnson and the neighbor had been a carefully planned part of this strategy, an emotional lever to weaken a pillar of the community and gain control over valuable assets. Several other families were found to be targets of similar tactics. Private secrets were uncovered and used to threaten or coerce compliance. Some neighbors had been forced to sell properties below market value, others pressured into making financial decisions under duress. The operation was not random, it was a systematic effort to reshape the neighborhood's power structure in favor of the conspirators. Helen Johnson's public exposure of her husband's affair had unintentionally unraveled this dangerous game. By breaking the silence, she forced the conspirators into the open and disrupted their carefully laid plans. Yet this act of courage also intensified the threats against her family. Anonymous warnings increased, and subtle intimidation tactics escalated, reminding Helen that those behind the conspiracy were still watching and willing to act. The community's trust was deeply fractured. Long-time friendships dissolved under the weight of suspicion. People who once shared meals and celebrations became wary and distant, uncertain who might be involved in the deception. The neighborhood's social fabric, once its greatest strength, now seemed irreparably torn. Law enforcement efforts expanded into a complex multi-agency operation involving financial crimes experts, cybercrime specialists, and undercover officers. Each lead uncovered new layers of the scheme, revealing the extent to which the mastermind had embedded themselves in local government, real estate, and community organizations. It became clear that the fight to restore justice would be long and difficult. Meanwhile, Helen and George struggled to find a way forward amid the chaos. Their marriage, strained and battered by betrayal, had become a symbol of the community's unraveling. They faced not only the challenge of healing their relationship, but also protecting their family from ongoing threats. Despite the turmoil, Helen remained determined to seek justice and reclaim their lives. The neighbors' true role was finally exposed during a crucial breakthrough. Evidence showed they had been acting under orders from the mastermind, using their relationship with George as a tool to manipulate and control. This revelation shocked many, casting the neighbor in a new, more sinister light, and deepening the sense of betrayal felt by the community. Public opinion was divided. Some sympathized with Helen and George, admiring their courage in facing the ordeal head-on. Others, wary of the secrets and lies uncovered, remained suspicious and cautious. The neighborhood had changed, and so had the people who lived there. The anniversary celebration, once a joyous occasion, was now remembered as the day the community's hidden darkness came to light. The perfect image of Maplewood was shattered, replaced by a sobering awareness of the complexities and dangers that had been lurking beneath the surface. As the investigation continued, the community began to grapple with the reality of rebuilding trust and healing old wounds. The path forward was uncertain, marked by the need for vigilance, honesty, and a commitment to uncovering the full truth. The story that had started with a single act of betrayal had grown into a tale of manipulation, greed, and resilience. The people of Maplewood faced a new chapter in their lives, one where the shadows of the past demanded confrontation and where the hope for a safer, more honest future depended on courage and unity. Though the scars were deep, the neighborhood was not broken beyond repair. With each new revelation, the residents took small steps toward reclaiming their community from the darkness that had threatened to consume it. The journey was far from over, but the resolve to uncover justice and rebuild trust had never been stronger. The final chapter of this harrowing saga revealed not only the full extent of the conspiracy, but also the resilience and determination of a community refusing to be destroyed by secrets and betrayal. After months of painstaking investigation, the truth finally began to emerge in a way that would bring justice and closure, even if the scars left behind would take much longer to heal. The mastermind behind the scheme was identified as a local businessman with a history of manipulation and shady dealings. He had spent years weaving a web of control, exploiting personal secrets and financial vulnerabilities to dominate the neighborhood's real estate market and social hierarchy. His plan involved using blackmail and betrayal to weaken key figures like George Johnson and force them to relinquish control of valuable assets. This man's reach was far deeper than anyone had imagined. Several prominent families had been targeted, their private lives invaded and weaponized to serve his ambitions. Through threats and coercion, he forced them to sell properties at undervalued prices or funnel money into his enterprises. The neighbor's involvement as a willing participant in this plan was part of a larger strategy to isolate and control victims by turning them against each other. When the authorities moved to arrest the mastermind, they uncovered a trove of documents, emails, and recordings that detailed the extent of his operation. These materials exposed not only financial crimes, but also the emotional manipulation and psychological abuse inflicted on his victims. The evidence was overwhelming and led to multiple charges, including fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. While many were grateful for the chance to reclaim their lives and neighborhoods, the damage done to relationships and trust could not be easily repaired. The once close-knit community of Maplewood had been forever changed, its perfect image shattered by the ugly truths that had been hiding just beneath the surface.
Helen Johnson emerged as a symbol of strength and courage throughout this ordeal. Her decision to expose her husband's affair, though painful, had triggered the chain of events that ultimately dismantled the criminal operation. Despite the personal cost, she remained committed to healing and rebuilding, not only within her family, but also within the neighborhood that had been torn apart. George faced his own reckoning, grappling with guilt and the consequences of his actions. The affair and his involvement in the scheme had brought devastation, but he took steps toward accountability and sought to repair the damage where possible. Their marriage, though deeply wounded, began the slow process of healing as both Helen and George worked through the challenges together. The neighbor who had betrayed the Johnsons was also held accountable. Their role in the conspiracy was undeniable, and the legal consequences were severe. The community struggled to come to terms with the betrayal by someone they had trusted and considered part of their daily lives. It was a painful reminder of how appearances could be deceiving. In the aftermath, Maplewood began to rebuild. Neighborhood meetings focused on transparency and support, aiming to restore trust and prevent similar situations in the future. Residents worked to create stronger bonds, understanding now the importance of vigilance and open communication. Counseling and community programs were introduced to help families cope with the emotional fallout. Many found comfort in shared experiences, recognizing that healing was not a solitary journey, but one that required collective effort. Slowly, the neighborhood began to reclaim its identity, not as a perfect place, but as one resilient enough to face its darkest moments and emerge stronger. The anniversary celebration that had marked the beginning of this crisis was never forgotten. It stood as a powerful reminder of how fragile trust can be, and how courage in the face of betrayal can spark change. What had once been a moment of joy became a turning point that exposed truth and demanded justice. Looking back, the story of the Johnsons and their community serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of secrets and the corrosive power of manipulation. It also highlights the strength found in honesty and the importance of standing up against wrongdoing, no matter how difficult the path. The journey was far from easy, but the resilience displayed by Helen, George, and their neighbors proved that even the deepest wounds could begin to heal with time, effort, and a shared commitment to truth. Maplewood's story is a testament to the human spirit's capacity to overcome betrayal and rebuild trust, one step at a time. In the end, the neighborhood learned a vital lesson. Perfection is an illusion, but integrity, courage, and community can create a foundation strong enough to withstand even the most devastating storms. The future remained uncertain, but with that foundation in place, hope endured.